Welcome to School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist and a mental health coach, and I know firsthand that rock bottom can be the greatest teacher and a springboard for a beautiful life. And it's all these careers, passions and life experiences combined that have given birth to this podcast. And as you know, I invite fellow creatives and all inspiring people that have hit rock bottom, survived and thrived. This is a podcast of hope, how to get out of the darkness and stay in the light. And I am really excited today because I've got the resplendent Ria Fay in the studio. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really well. And thank you so much for coming all the way from Brighton today to come and join me. I really appreciate it. And for those of you wondering who Ria is, I'm going to give Ria a quick intro, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So Ria Fay is an actor, a children's party entertainer, and the co-artistic director of concept theatre, graduating from East 15 Acting School. She is about to appear in the Polar Express in Edinburgh this Christmas, and this summer produced a theatre show, Sons, which sold out at both Vault Festival and the Brighton Fringe, and has since been nominated for an Off-Fest award. That's really cool. Ria was officially diagnosed with OCD at the age of 25, despite having had symptoms since the age of 5. She has worked with OCD Action and performed her show, I'm Just a Little Bit OCD. The show later toured London in 2022 to Southwark Playhouse, Chicken Shed and the Cockpit, with supports from the Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund. She recently recorded Director of Me for Radio 4, detailing a month in the life of someone with OCD. And I've actually listened to it twice in the last couple of days, and I'm going to put a little link in the show notes there. Go and check out that. It's absolutely amazing. Before we get into the conversation here, if you're listening to this or watching this on Spotify, remember to hit follow, give us 5 stars. If you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe. And if it's on Apple, leave a review. Right, that's the plug over for the show. Let's get into why we're here. Ria, I've asked you on because I know that you've gone through a rock bottom with your OCD. I'm sure there's been more than one. We're going to start there. If you could share your rock bottom moment, and then, as always, we'll pan out and get into a lot more detail from that point.
Yeah, of course. So, as you said, I've had OCD a long time, many peaks and troughs. I think the rock bottom I'm going to speak about was in 2021, maybe 2022. It was in that kind of like COVID era of not really knowing the day or year. So for those who don't know, obviously we're going to go into detail about what OCD is, but basically it's like a very big intolerance to doubt or uncertainty. And so COVID was an absolute kind of mashup of all the things that I'd been doing my whole life, knowing that they were OCD, knowing that they were irrational, and then suddenly they sort of had some rationality into them. For example, like, you know, way before COVID, I remember not going or going on a night out with a cold and kind of having these intrusive thoughts that because I had a cold, somebody near me might get ill from me, and maybe they have a grandma who's ill and she'd die, and because I'd gone out with a cold. You know, this is before COVID, back in like 2011. So those kind of thought patterns had already been in my mind. I'd had kind of compulsive hand washing for many years on and off in regards to like food allergens or at work in a kitchen or raw meat or like illness. And then suddenly I was thrown into this kind of world, which we all were, where there were signs everywhere saying like, wash your hands to save a life. Now I'm taking this literally. Like I've been telling you for years, everyone. So yeah, I was halfway through therapy for OCD when COVID hit, and basically like OCD works in kind of themes and subsets, and mine was kind of revolving around ethics, morality, rule following, like a kind of being a perfect moral human. Very The Good Place, if you've seen that program. It's very like it's a Netflix show, very good, right. But like kind of obsessive about ethics and morality. And then suddenly that just switched, and it was like, I must do all I can to make sure nobody gets COVID. I was taking lateral flows every single day with no symptoms, kind of like shining a light into them at the window, taking photos of them and zooming in to make sure there definitely wasn't 2 lines. And this was going on and on and on. And even like mental health professionals who treated OCD for years were like, well, we don't really know what to do because the treatment for OCD would be exposing yourself to the fears. However, with COVID, it was an actual fear. It wasn't an irrationality. It was just you were taking maybe a 10% chance and inflating it to 100%. And that, again, is another thing that comes with OCD, is this inflated sense of responsibility. So it's like, it wouldn't be like, oh, I had COVID. It's not like, in my mind, if I had any, like, just a tickle in my throat, I'd be like, well, if I go out and I have COVID, someone might get it and they might be vulnerable and they might die and it's because of me. And I'll never know if that happened. So it's best to just not take any risks at all.
Yeah.
So that was going on and on and on. Things started to slightly open up. And as you said, I'm an actor. I think a lot of my acting skills probably come from masking and pretending to be okay. And, you know, I'm quite good at that. So it's never really impacted my performance. Definitely off stage, but I've always managed to kind of switch it off. And this is why it's probably my rock bottom, because this was the first time where I was in a performance space in the middle of a performance and all I was thinking about was COVID. So I'd had like a cold a week before. I knew it was a cold because I was lateral flowing every day. I had a PCR test. The PCR was negative. The symptoms are gone. But because the audition, I don't know if you remember these days, we had to sign a sort of waiver to say that you didn't have any symptoms.
Right, yeah.
And because of the wording, it was like, I have not previously had symptoms. I was like, well, I have previously had symptoms. Well, we've all previously had symptoms. There was no time scale on the question. And I was taking COVID obsessively, and then that kind of manifested into taking the rules obsessively, which we all know were quite confusing at times. And then that kind of expanded again to just taking all rules, policies and procedures, you know, to the extreme, reading them all, following them to the letter. So I was like, well, I can't sign this because I have previously had symptoms. You know, most people would read round the line of being like, well, you've had a PCR, you're not ill anymore, you know it wasn't COVID, so it's absolutely fine. I freaked out. You know, I spoke to my lovely agent, Meredith Management. She's so kind. And she was like, yes, we love her. She was like, you know, just take a break. No, sorry. Let me go back. She was like, Ria, this is not talking to you because you're not ill, and you're not ill. You haven't been for a few days. You've done a PCR. You know, it's just a wording. So I went to the audition. It was an audition. I signed an NDA, but it's coming out soon. So it was basically for a major movie, and it would be for like a named role, you know, which was great. And I'd already done a self-tape, so this was an in-person.
So it was like a recall, really.
Yeah, yeah, okay, cool. Really good. Like, and I was really excited to go. No, I wasn't. Basically, I normally would have been really excited to go, but all I kept thinking about was this piece of paper, and I was obsessing over it completely. And then when we went in, we had to get lateral flows done, even though we'd obviously done them and signed the thing. And the whole time I was like, oh, God. And that was obviously negative because I wasn't ill and had a PCR. But all I kept thinking was this kind of like, what if I go in and then I secretly did have it and the PCR was wrong and all the lateral flows are wrong and I have had a symptom before. And it's like, you know, it was just getting so much. Even in the room, we were kind of in those taped squares. And like, even if a toe went out of the tape, I would think, oh, God, I've put everyone at risk. It was a lot. And then I came out of there and somehow I managed some choreography and I performed it. But the whole time in my mind, I was not present, you know. And I just remember leaving and going, God, I hope I don't get a recall, because it was like an afternoon recall, because the fear of going back in that room was worse than the possibility of basically getting what for me as a new graduate would be a massive, you know, this is a red carpet, big movie. And yeah, I sort of ran out in the middle of December with no coat. Like I just forgot my coat and it was freezing. This was like, I think it was like minus something. Rang my sister and I was like going over it and over it. And I was like, yeah, they said, you know, if you've previously had symptoms and just going spiraling off. I didn't get a recall and I was very happy that I didn't get one because I just needed to get out of there. And they did that, you know, thing that oh, maybe we'll consider you for another role. And I thought that was a polite decline. But then they messaged my agent and was like, actually, we would like to consider Ria for like an ensemble part.
Okay.
And I freaked out. I didn't want to go. I kept coming up with these excuses that were like, oh, I'm doing my play. Oh, it was 2022 because I was doing my OCD play. What if the dates conflict? What if, I can't go and then I disappoint them? Isn't it better to just... And then one of my best friends from uni works at the agency, which is why it's lovely for me to be of that agency as well, because she understands the way my mind works and that kind of thing. And she was like, I think this is OCD. She was like, these things that you're coming up with, we don't know if the dates are going to clash. That's just part of the industry. You can't not do anything in case in 6 months' time you can't maybe do something else. And said like maybe take a bit of time out. And that was really good advice. That was like, what I think she said, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Sure. It's about endurance. If you need to take time out, then do that now. And that was, I think, although I've had, other things that were more extreme happen, that was the kind of biggest moment where I was like, this has creeped into the thing that I've basically spent my life dedicated to do, and taken all the joy out of it and just made it horrible. Like I just didn't want to go because I knew I'd have to sign another form. And I know a lot of people with like health anxiety get this as well. I have very strong psychosomatic system. So if somebody says to me, do you have, it was that kind of thing. Like, even if you feel unwell, even if you're just tired, as soon as I'd hear that, I'd be like, I am tired. Yeah. Or my throat does feel weird because I'm focusing on that part. Maybe I have got a sniffle. Is it because I've been out? So there was so much uncertainty. I just thought...
And Ria, you're obviously describing a very specific moment in that kind of whole pandemic period with the audition. But it sounds to me like that whole period must have just been a constant state of sort of anxiety, fear and worry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the whole thing was horrific.
So sort of describe to us sort of emotionally during that period what you were experiencing on an emotional level. Because you've described really well the kind of nuts and bolts of the situation, but sort of like kind of on an emotional level, that sounds really draining and tiring, what you're describing.
Oh yeah, it was like a 9 out of 10 anxiety on the daily.
Wow.
So everything I did, I think a therapist explained it quite well. It was like you have everything that happens you think is going to be the worst case scenario of it happening.
Right.
But that feels like your truth.
Yeah.
And you feel like you will never recover from it.
Right.
So even if I went to the shop and touched something, I would then buy it, even if I didn't want it. Like if it was an accident.
Yeah.
I took the rules to such an extreme level. So I was obsessively reading them all the time, like the whole PDF, not just the shortened version. I started feeling responsible for other people. So if I knew people who were sort of bending the rules, or when it was more of a guideline, I would feel like, well, what if they get ill and I haven't told them not to? So I should be telling them not to, as if I'm sort of the government.
Yeah.
Very policey, which they did not enjoy. I would only I was like, you've been out for one walk and that's it. And, my boyfriend's an electrician going in and out of houses all day. And I'm like, right, come on, we're going for this one walk, even though he's already walked to the van, gone to 6 homes. I was being very, even when it was a guideline, not like, when it kind of went out, I never... did anything
just
to
give more context for the listeners and viewers, because I think, especially when you frame it this way and then through the lens of the pandemic, I think people will really get how horrific it must have been for you. Because before we go into it, I just want to give the listeners and viewers a bit more detail around OCD. So OCD affects 1 to 2% of the population in the UK, which is about 750,000 people. Obviously, if you take into account loved ones and family members, boyfriends, husbands, wives, it then obviously doubles straight away. And it's probably much higher anyway, because it's probably something that a lot of people keep secret. And in 1990, the World Health Organization ranked obsessive compulsive disorder in the global top 10 leading causes of disability in terms of loss of income and quality of life. So OCD, so you've got intrusive, which means not wanted obsessions, which are thoughts, and compulsions or or actions, which are often linked, and the action is designed to relieve the obsession. There is a brief relief sometimes, but then the obsession is reinforced. It's a bit like scratching a bite. It sounds like it just makes it worse in the long run. Now, a disorder, and this is why it's, such a debilitating condition. A disorder is an illness that disrupts normal physical or mental functions, and it comes with deeply intense feelings or emotions of anxiety and fear. Now, I've been on the NHS website and also OCD UK. I mean, I think OCD UK is fantastic. I think it's a brilliant website. We're just going to break down some of the kind of classic symptoms of OCD, and I'm just going to ask Ria if that's all right, if they apply to you.
Yeah.
And then we can
do you
dive.
want me to say now or in my life?
I think it could be either.
Cool. 'Cause I'm a bit recovered now, which is great. Yay me, but also.
Yes, and Ria's recovery is amazing, by the way, and we're going to celebrate that and talk about that. So I think it's probably more retrospective then.
Yeah.
Sounds like. So the first bit of things I want to ask you about is around obsessions. So it says on the NHS website, this is where an unwanted, intrusive, and often distressing thought, image, or urge repeatedly enters your mind. And then it gives some examples, and I've pulled these out of NHS and OCD UK. I've kind of mixed them up a bit. Does this one apply to you? Fear, or did apply to you? Fear of deliberately harming yourself or others?
Yes, probably. That was a very long time ago, if so. I always kind of joke about that if OCD themes were a bingo card, I've pretty much had a full house over my life. I've delved in. I think it was more fear of harm coming to them, and it be because of an intrusive thought I had. For example, like, I remember specifically, like, I'd see a family member and then I would just get like an intrusive thought, like, I hope you get cancer and die. Wow, okay, that's new. And then I'd be like, if they do get cancer, it's because I thought that. And then, so that kind of harm.
Yeah.
Yes, but not sort of like lose control with a knife, although I know that is quite common with a lot of people.
And did you have to alleviate that thought with a compulsion, or was it, or would the thought just be distressing enough? Would you have to like do an action to prove that you weren't going to do it?
Yes, it's quite hard to like label specific obsessions with specific compulsions because I think sometimes they're very linked. Like, I feel like my hands are dirty and I've got COVID germs, so I'm going to wash them. But sometimes they're very unlinked. Gotcha. Like, I've had this thought that's disturbing, so I'm going to go switch the light off 9 times. Yeah. It could be so random and seemingly no connection. So as memory serves, because that was a long time ago, I can't remember specific compulsions, but reassurance seeking is a massive one for me. So if I had a thought like that, I might then go and deliberately be very kind to my nan to prove to myself that I don't want something bad to happen to her. But from the outside, that's just Ria being kind to a nan. But I think with OCD, the biggest thing is it's not what you're doing, it's the why. Yeah, right. It's not, oh, I'm washing my hands. It's why are you washing your hands? Gotcha. And that is a key part of treatment. Because if you don't tackle the why and you just tackle the action, it can wheedle out to another action and still kind of fulfill that compulsive role. I don't know if that helps.
Definitely. And I think there'll be a lot of people listening and watching this who know anxiety very, very well. And obviously anxiety is linked to OCD, but they're obviously very different things. But I think your experience of getting through quite extreme intrusive thoughts, which are obviously on a different level to anxiety, probably will help people with sort of low-level anxiety who might be able to relate to some of these things. And just hear you saying that you've had that thought, I know is going to help someone, because they're the sort of things that people don't talk about, do they? They're like,
It's a big passion of mine, yes. You know, like I think it's like 97 or 90, I can't remember. But people get intrusive thoughts. Yes. Not mentally ill people, everyone. You know, the classic, oh, train's coming, you're just going to jump in front of it. Not because you want to, not because you're mentally ill, just weird. I think it's sort of like your brain's sudden realization of what you could do. Yeah. But if you've got OCD, it's like, do I want to jump in front of the train? Why did I think that? Like, does that mean that I'm okay? And all you do is basically latch on to the intrusive thought and try and obsess over it until you know what it means about you, when actually it's just a passing thought that if you just left alone would
And I guess that's one of the key differences between someone with OCD and someone who doesn't. I think you talked about it on the Radio 4 documentary. I don't know if I can call it that, or whatever you might want to phrase it. You were talking to your friend about at work, having the thought that you could have set the building on fire. And I think your friend turned around and said, well, the difference is, Ria, that I might have that thought, but then go to sleep. Whereas you're going to be up ruminating and obsessing over it. And that's one of the other key differences, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. And sort of not knowing where your responsibility lies. That's a big one.
Right.
So there's sort of like the themes of OCD, which you've touched on. So, for example, that intrusive thought would maybe come over a subset, which is harm OCD. It's not a different mental illness, but for the help of therapy and for the help of like community within the OCD kind of world, people sort of subset their themes.
Right.
So there might be harm OCD, where you obsess over causing harm or harming yourself or harming others, and that could be emotionally or physically or sexually even. And then there might be some of the themes, for example, contamination OCD. So you obsess about the fact that things are dirty, or even you can have emotional contamination. So you've had a bad thought and now you feel contaminated.
Gotcha.
So that's why the washing hands is quite interesting.
That's really interesting because it kind of links into some of the ones I was going to.
Oh yes, please go. Also, I have ADHD, so just that's why I'm going all off on the old topic.
I love it. This is brilliant. It's brilliant. That means
Sorry, Oliver.
I can do less, which is fantastic. It's probably good for you guys at home as well.
Oh God.
Yes.
Stick to the point.
No, you're massively on point. I hugely thank you. One of them you just mentioned, fear of contamination by disease, infection, or an unpleasant substance. And then you just touched on it there, and I think this is quite new research. And I found this on OCD UK.
Ooh.
Mental contamination, which I think is still being studied and understood, which you just touched on, can be evoked by times when a person perhaps felt badly treated physically or mentally through critical or verbally abusive remarks. It is almost as if they are made to feel like dirt, which creates a feeling of internal uncleanliness. Is that something you've ever experienced?
I mean, the fear of being a bad person, that's quite a big driving point of a lot of my OCD. With COVID, it's not, I'm scared I'm going to get ill. It's I'm scared I'm going to get ill and cause someone else to get ill. And then I've done something that makes me a quote unquote bad person. So that kind of inner, I guess, contamination in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's why it's so interesting to look at the cycle of OCD and the meaning rather than always kind of seeing what we see, a lot of the misconceptions of hand washing or light switches or counting, because they're just a reaction of actually what's happening mentally. But definitely probably with the kind of I'm evil, I'm a bad person contamination.
I suppose the irony is if you were evil or a bad person, you'd be the last person to worry about if you were an evil or a bad person.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with any mental health condition. I see it all the time in rehabs. I might be working with a policeman or a head teacher, or it could be anybody. And intellectually, they know that this addiction doesn't make any logical sense, but yet they go back. So as obvious as it might seem, mental health doesn't care about that, does it? Or just
it just adds another level, because then you're like, I'm washing my hands because I had a bad thought earlier, and I know that washing my hands isn't going to make a difference. But yet I feel compelled to do it. Yeah. And then people like to explain the irrationality to you, and you're like, I know. Yeah. However, I'm still going to do it. Yeah. And then you have therapy and you add another layer of, and now I know I'm just feeding the compulsive loop, but however, I feel like I need to do it and I know it's going to make it worse, but here I am doing it again. I think we briefly had a chat earlier about how I can see kind of some links with addictive behaviors because, compulsions or compulsive behaviors. Yeah. Are behaviors that it's not about wanting to do it, it's feeling that need to do it to cope in that moment, that kind of inability to sit with discomfort or anxiety or guilt or shame or disgust or whatever emotion you're feeling. It's so intense that you need a release now. But yeah.
Did you ever experience a sort of a need for symmetry or orderliness? For example, you may feel the need to ensure all the labels on the tins in the cupboard face the same way.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't actually.
Yeah. What about violent religious or sexual thoughts that you find repulsive or frightening?
Oh, yes. Lots of this one. So this is where we go into my topic of POCD, which I like to bring up in every interview I
do.
do. So yes, I had lots of these kind of thoughts, violent, and I would sort of add offensive there as well. So, sort of discriminatory, homophobic, anything that I care about. OCD likes to destroy things you care about because else the thought wouldn't bother you,
Yeah.
So for people who work with children, for example, paedophilia OCD can be quite common because they care about children. The worst thing that they could do to a child would be to harm a child in that way. And so the brain latches onto that and might start obsessing over the possibility of it. That's something that happened to me when I was 15, which is obviously quite bizarre because I was a child myself at the time.
Yeah.
But I would get sort of intrusive thoughts, but also another thing, OCD can manifest in thoughts, but also images.
Yeah.
So just like flash images in your mind of horrific things, or even just intrusive sort of urges. So at that time, like if I was, for example, I don't know, with a child, playing a game, and, kids come out of weird things, don't they? And they say, I don't know, they say something weird, or, they accidentally brush past my leg. I remember like, oh God, did they brush past my leg? Like, did I move there on, and you just, anything that happens, as innocent as it could be, your mind will twist it and turn it into, that child said that they like me. Oh, they're cute. Did I mean cute? Did I mean attractive? Am I attracted to them? It will spiral into these, irrational as me buying things because I touched them with no symptoms. Same irrationality. But obviously, because it is a topic that, is hard for anyone, and it's a very emotive topic and it's a very distressing subject, it causes a huge reaction in people who think that they might have those.
Be absolutely terrifying, particularly if you're someone that has no idea what OCD is.
Well, that's the thing,
And you're having these intrusive thoughts and reading into them all the things that you've just described without any knowledge of what OCD is or the whys and wherefores. That must be absolutely terrifying, I would think. And just you talking about it now is going to really help somebody.
Oh, yeah, because that's, again, like what I said, even people without OCD have had weird thoughts like that.
Yeah.
Like, did I just look at a kid weird? Oh, God, that was weird. Shrug it off.
Yeah.
Or, anything. Like they change, for example, like some people get like postnatal OCD, like they get postnatal depression, and they might be changing their baby's nappy and then have a horrible image come into their mind, and then, anything like that. But that's one I do like to always bring up because it's so stigmatized, obviously, and for understandable reasons, because the subject is so sensitive. But it's good to come out with these things.
Hugely important.
And a big thing is, like, I remember a friend telling me that a therapist had said to them, the feelings of attraction isn't discussed, shame, guilt, trying to eradicate a thought, but again, that irrationality doesn't make sense because you're like, well, why is the thought coming into my mind? It's coming in for a reason. I keep thinking about it. And I think it's that same thing as if you say to anyone, don't think about a red elephant, what are they going to think about?
That's right. It's the white bear effect, I think they call it. Don't think about a white bear, and all you can think about is a white bear.
Exactly, and that's what you're constantly doing to yourself. And again, like you said at the time, if somebody had asked me, now I can absolutely say with confidence I had POCD. The theme then changed. Luckily for me, it lasted about 2 years, and I started obsessing over something else. Yeah. But if you'd have asked me at the time, my answer would have been, well, I wouldn't have said anything, but also I would have been like, I'm a danger to children. I can never have children. I don't like going near children because being near them triggers all those thoughts.
Right.
And I believed at the time I was a dangerous person to be around. At 15, it's quite a lot.
That is a lot.
Quite a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
I must say. I think that's one of the other key things, looking through the data here and some of the classic things is the emotions that then attached to these thoughts. Because like you say with your friend, they might be able to just put it to the back of their mind. But with OCD, obviously, NHS says a feeling of intense anxiety or distress. But actually, I think you say there's 5 symptoms. I don't want to misquote you. I think I've read on one of your blogs that it's guilt, shame, anxiety, fear, disgust, the big 5.
Yes, I think, and probably more, it's just basically an unbearable negative emotion.
Yeah.
Is how I would maybe be as inclusive as I can with that.
And talking about it the way that you are now, publicly as well today, do you find that's really, really healing? To be able to sort of air what those thoughts were in a public arena? Is there something about expunging them. Is that the word? No, expelling them.
But that's a better word. Expunging.
Expunging. I don't even know what that means. But something about, giving air to those thoughts that kind of takes the power out of them.
I think yes and no and yes. I think saying them, absolutely. Like the biggest thing that came from doing my play was, especially with the POCD, we were kind of trying to raise awareness of OCD. I was working with actors who had OCD. We went down the kind of harm, do I want my sister to die? Am I going to stab my sister? And then we had this kind of thing of being like, we want to talk about POCD, but we don't want to be misconstrued. What if somebody doesn't understand it? What if they think that we think that, we're sort of okaying this horrific subject? And then we thought, well, we're going to have to, because like for us anyway, we want to challenge these misconceptions. We want to. And what if there's somebody out there that has that exact subset who isn't seeing themselves in it?
I think it's amazing.
Fear of
honestly, I think it's amazing that you're coming here and talking about these subsets, because a lot of people wouldn't have the bravery to, and I think it's incredible, honestly. So keep talking about it.
So that is with friends. I'd say publicly there's still a little bit of anxiety, because obviously you don't know who's going to listen. But I have enough knowledge and self-assuredness that if somebody came to me and was like, well, I just think you're dangerous to children. One, I don't get those thoughts anymore anyway at all, which shows that it was a subset. But two, I have enough knowledge in myself to be able to go, okay, you've misunderstood what's going on. Here's some information. Yeah. And if you continue to misunderstand, then that's on you. Whereas as a 15-year-old, I mean,
of course,
God knows.
Yeah, and I think the stats back up with OCD that actually you're the one person who's probably less likely to do the things that you're worried about, and there's been a lot of research on that. To back that up as well. One of the greatest challenges that people with OCD face is the need to fight both the stigma of mental health disorders and the widely held belief that OCD is a mild or even quirky term. Now, I know that your play that you wrote was called A Little Bit OCD. Now, obviously, that's a very inaccurate and offensive term, isn't it? If someone says, I'm a little bit OCD. I haven't seen your play and I don't know huge amounts about it. Is that what it was about, fighting that kind of stigma that OCD is just, organising your shirts in the right order and, trivial things like that?
Yes. Yeah, that was the big motivation for it, I think, is like, I don't tend to get annoyed. I mean, sometimes it is frustrating, but I don't tend to get annoyed at people for not knowing, because I think it's a widely, and even on the news, you've got big celebrities who say, I'm a bit OCD about this. If you haven't heard about OCD and now you have, it's like that thing where you see a car someone's bought and you've never seen one before, and then you see it everywhere. You'll hear this now all the time. People say it. Literally last week I was working and somebody was like, I'm really OCD about like putting all these pens on with the lids, and I was like, oh, it's really bad for you. I'm so sorry. Once thought I was going to kill my nan, but never mind. Sorry, love a bit of humour. Yes,
you've got to bring humour into it, haven't you?
Exactly. Yeah. So we did a lot of that. We did lots of memes. Yeah. So for example, the memes. Oh,
my sister would love that. My sister loves a meme.
Yes, but we got these inaccurate memes, and then we would use these very sharp contrasts. So for example, like, I'm going to start holding OCD meetings at my house. Not because I have OCD, but because I can't be bothered to clean it myself. And then straight away, the protagonist would then give a stark example, like I've just done, about violence or, some of these horrific things. And you would sort of see them juxtaposed. So it's a lot of that.
Is it coming back on anywhere?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Well, listen, if it is, you'll be the first to know about it, and I'll make sure I update the show notes. So whenever you're listening to this in the ether of the internet, go check the show notes, because it might be on right now if you're watching it much later.
Yes. If you'd like to fund it, let me know. That's the key.
Yeah, if you want to fund it. Thank you. Some of the compulsions here, I mean, we've talked about some of them already. I'm just going to kind of reel a few off, and I want you to say stop if there's one that you used to do, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to reel them off quick. Cleaning and hand washing.
Yes. No. Yes. I'm going to say yes if I did them. Is that okay?
Yes.
Because my brain's funny. Yes.
Okay. Checking.
Yes.
Right. I learned this is quite interesting, that they've updated it to say even checking Google or checking for your own body reactions and sensations can count.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't have counted as checking.
This is the thing. I didn't get diagnosed for ages because of this, because I used to check I'd offended people. Oh, sorry, did you just misunderstand me? Because I didn't really mean that. I just want you to know that actually what I meant by that was that...
Yeah.
And then I'd say it again. And then I'd say it again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm checking that I haven't offended them.
Right.
I'm not checking that the light's off or checking the gas.
Right.
There's a lot of translating you got to do, even in some of the diagnostic criteria.
And I think a lot of people with anxiety will recognise that one. You know, sort of checking that reassurance, or why haven't they responded to that WhatsApp? What does that mean? How have I offended them? And all of that.
Definitely.
Counting, ordering, and arranging.
Yes.
Right. Asking for reassurance. You've just
yes.
Now, I know hoarding is a little bit controversial within OCD, and I think hoarding now only counts if it's for obsessive reasons.
Yeah, within OCD, it's like, I think there's like a hoarding disorder that might be a bit separate, and then can be compulsive as well. Or,
right.
I don't really know. I've never done it, so I don't know.
It's not something for you.
But I know people with OCD who have. Like, I can't throw away this cup because my mum has drunk out of it, and if I throw it away, it means I don't love her anymore. Gotcha. For example, could be a random example I pulled from my mind. Yeah. So but I haven't. Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think, looking at the history of OCD diagnostics, I think hoarding was kind of pretty much in there up until recently. And now there's a caveat that it is a separate disorder, but can sometimes be part of OCD if it's for an obsessive reason. Repeating words in your head or phrases.
Yes.
Right. This one I found really interesting. Thinking neutralizing thoughts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, what's that? What's a neutralizing thought?
So, for example, let's use an example, COVID. So that audition I spoke about, I might go, oh, God, my toe's gone over the line, which means I have COVID and I've given it to everyone. And then I might think, my toe didn't go over the line. I haven't given it to everyone. I'm not even ill.
Right.
So it is sort of self-reassurance sometimes, but you might counteract it. Or like, there's a knife there, I could lose control and stab my sister. And then you might undo it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Or like, I want this person to die. No, I don't want them to die. It's kind of like a plus and a minus. You're trying to get it back to neutral.
Homeostasis, neutral.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's also compulsive.
Avoiding places and situations that could trigger obsessive thoughts. Yeah,
yes.
I think we touched on that briefly, didn't we, earlier?
Well, I've worked in a kitchen for 10 years, and even now in recovery, I will not work in a kitchen. Right. I will not work in a bar. I don't work in hospitality because of the fear of allergens causing someone to die,
Got you.
All of that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And do you see that as an ongoing thing? That sort of a boundary for your mental health that will always kind of continue?
I mean, hospitality's hard, isn't it? It's one of the hardest jobs for the least amount of money, usually.
You're not going to need hospitality. You're going to be getting, Oscars and stuff.
I don't know about that.
5-star hotels.
I have a lot of respect for what I did for 10 years. It is a hard job anyway. So, it's not like I have this earning to go back into it for myself. But I was constantly worried about, I've got to check people's ID. Are they over 25? I was IDing 42-year-olds just because I got an intrusive thought that they might be under 18.
Right.
I'm using the red board that's got meat on it. And then I'm washing the red board, the sink, the bottle that holds the flash, my hands 9 times in the kitchen whilst working. Someone comes in with an allergy. Is there gluten in the air? Constant,
it's not a job, it's an ordeal.
Yes, and I did it for so long,
Right.
Yeah, it's weird.
Appreciate this is a hard question. I've looked at all the research around what causes OCD, and I've read lots of stuff, and science kind of turns around and says, but we still don't know.
Yeah, we love that.
Is that something that you're interested in your own journey? Do you think there might be a specific cause for yourself, or do you feel it's something that you were born with? Or
I think, and I'm not a scientist or a doctor, I think there are physiological, from my own research, factors in terms of like you have your amygdala, which is your fight or flight response, very usually hypervigilant for people with OCD. They're looking for danger all the time. They're looking to negotiate situations. From what I think is sort of like, so you might have the biology to potentially have OCD, but if something traumatic happens or you're in a lot of situations of uncertainty, then it can become a coping mechanism.
Right, got you.
I'm going to try and control everything I can because I can't control the bigger things.
Got it.
So I would say I personally think I have that nature of it. And I know people that have also got that kind of nature, and they, I don't want to say dabble in OCD, but, they do behaviours that are quite OCD, but it's far more contained for them.
Got you, right.
But again, maybe they could, hopefully not, something could happen and that could trigger in them. So I would say yes, like, probably won't go into it too much, but like in terms of I've had quite a unstable, I would say, moving around a lot, lots of different things happening as a child, lots of different things going on. That's probably caused me to try and control my environment as much as I could.
Got you. Yeah, which we see in a lot of other mental health conditions as well.
Eating disorders as well. There's quite a lot of similarities.
Addiction as well, and other things like that. So we do know through science, though, that medication, and it says here between 40 and 60% of people respond really well to medication with OCD. Now, I appreciate this is your personal medical information. You don't need to share anything you don't want to, but has medication played a role in your recovery? I know that therapy has, and I want to ask you about that as well.
Yeah.
Can we dive just briefly into your recovery?
God, I'm not good at brief. Yes. So I took propranolol, which is a beta blocker.
Right.
Which kind of lowered it made me functionable, I will say. It didn't really lower my anxiety in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Also, I have a heart condition, so I've taken beta blockers before. And apparently, when I was 10, my dad said I leveled out a bit. So that's interesting. Took it for a different reason.
Right.
Didn't know I was mentally ill, but helped. I've been on sertraline for 18 months, which is an antidepressant, because I think there is what's the thing? Serotonin. People with OCD tend to have a lack of serotonin as well.
Right.
Also, a lot of people, I have never been diagnosed with depression. I think I was probably quite depressed in the pandemic because everything I loved scared me, seeing family, friends, acting. But a lot of people with OCD also do have depression because of the self-esteem. If you think you're a danger to your family, you can't be near them, Or it's very self-critical, very self-punishing kind of disorder. So I think that probably helps people with OCD who are dealing with both. I'm currently I've weaned off a little bit just because I'm kind of intrigued to see how much the therapy that I've done has improved the symptoms without medication.
Yeah.
Very pro medicine, do what you need to do. But as I said, they do tend to level you out emotionally, which for some people, and for me in the pandemic, I needed to function. But as an actor, I'm quite numb. I'm numbed. So I need to maybe be able to try and explore that, and I have no qualms in a month's time because I have noticed some relapsing behaviors. If it is not a transitional period and it's becoming a bit more of an issue, I will just go back on it. That's fine for me.
Gosh, yeah. And in terms of talking therapies, I know the kind of gold standard is exposure response prevention, which I believe is an exposure to the trigger. So whatever the intrusive thought is, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, you then are exposed to it, and then basically you're not allowed to respond. You've got to sit with it. Is that
horrific? No, it's good. That was a good description.
Was it?
I'm laughing because it's
I thought I'd massively oversimplified something.
I'm laughing because it's just horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds really hard.
Really easy to explain. Like if you it's the same as phobia training. If you're terrified of spiders and they're not going to harm you, but you feel horrific. Day one, we might put a tiny spider in or we might show you a picture of a spider. Yeah. You sit there, you calm. I think a big thing they say is your adrenal system is obviously what causes fight or flight.
Yeah.
But there's only so much adrenaline. So if you do sit there, it will go down.
Right.
With OCD. I don't know if it's the same with panic and things because I know it's quite heightened for a long time. But it will go down. The problem is, I'm going to do it unless we've got a camera. So you get a spike. So it's like, I have COVID and I've given it to everyone, they've died. And then I'm like, I'll research it and make sure I haven't. And it comes down. But then it's like, well, what if I did? Whereas what we're trying to do is encourage that spike in a therapy session and allow it to peter down over time so that the next time it doesn't spike as high. And then it sort of ends up flattening.
Oh, that's
in
amazing.
Theory. So it could be like picture of a spider, small spider in your hand, and it's why it's very important to do it with a therapist, because if you did get an arachnophobia and shove what are they called? Tarantula?
Tarantula. I know. I nearly thought Tyrannosaurus Rex as well.
Yeah, me too.
I went all dino on you as well. Yeah.
Like on their face, they would completely freak out and never trust you again. Same thing with me. If you'd have said, okay, Ria, you've got a cough. Obviously, they wouldn't have said this anyway. Here you go see your nan. I'd be like, are you insane? Whereas it would be like, go and take your mask off to have a sip of water on a train, because I wouldn't even do that. Just then it might be, okay, go out without hand sanitizer in your bag to the shop. and see if the shop has sanitizer. And if they don't, well, that was their responsibility, not yours. And it was building it up.
I mean, it's incredible.
So, yeah,
you're
clear, probably not.
It's really clear, and your recovery journey is absolutely fantastic. And I love the way that you've said a couple of times during this interview. What it used to be like. There really does seem like a massive progression into really good recovery here. And do you attest that to the therapy that you've had mostly? What would you say has been the sort of game changer of getting you to this great place that you are now? I've just been hanging out with Ria for a couple of hours. Just an absolute delight.
Oh,
absolutely brilliant. So
can't stay on point, but she's a delight. That's my intrusive thoughts now. It's like, stick to the point. Yes, I think it's a lot. I will be as brief as I can. Very bumpy journey. I didn't get diagnosed for ages. They kept saying I had generalized anxiety disorder, which I did not. And the therapy for generalized anxiety disorder is find the problem, solve it if you can, or accept it. Which, if you have OCD, is solving it is compulsive, and accepting it is, also compulsive. So it took me a long time because I wasn't translating those checking things and things like that. I was scoring myself very low on anxiety because I had it all the time.
Right.
So only a 10. I was like on a 5, so I'd only notice a 10.
Yes.
Whereas actually I've never experienced a 0. So for a quote unquote person without it, I was going to say normal, but quote person without it. So yeah, I had a lot of different therapies. And also I got the therapy with the NHS, which was, I now know was mild to moderate OCD, but I think I had severe OCD. So at first I was in a group, and because mine kind of solely surrounded by responsibility, the fact they were telling me to do the exposures meant I didn't feel responsible, so I wouldn't get the spike. Right. I was obsessed with ethics and couldn't watch comedians because I couldn't get irony, and I was like, you just shouldn't joke about that, you shouldn't do this, oh god, I'm a horrible person, because I was in the room when someone told a joke. And they were making me watch the most offensive Cards Against Humanity games, Frankie Boyle, and I wasn't getting any anxiety because I was like, well, you're telling me to do it. I'm doing it as a homework. So it took a lot of unpicking, which is what I was saying about the motivation of, if I'd have decided to go and do that and enjoy a Frankie Boyle show, the anxiety spike would have been huge. So I did the group therapy, and then my theme changed to COVID, and then that was really hard for them to do. And so I think that kind of helped me a bit. And then I had private therapy with no OCD, and that helped a bit more. And then I ended up having sertraline, which lowered the spike down to a more manageable 5, 6. And the anxiety out of 10. And then I did more NHS therapy. But we started looking at the meaning of the thoughts rather than necessarily just negating the compulsion.
Right.
If that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Sort of. So it was a long journey.
I'm aware that Brian, Brian, our producer over here.
Hi, Brian. Sorry, it's been a long story and a long life of OCD.
He might boot me out in a minute, but there's one last question I really want to get in here because I can't believe the last hour's nearly up. And that's
oh my goodness,
that's crazy. Going back to you as an actor, and the industry being very difficult anyway for anybody. Even someone who has perfect mental health, if such a person exists. What's it like for you now going through that thread of a journey as an actor? And what I mean specifically is starting from waiting for the agent to ring with an audition, through to doing the self-tape or the in-person audition, through to waiting if you got the job or not, through to being on stage or on a set, through to reviews. I know that's an awful lot to unpack, but I just wondered, I find that whole process really, really difficult. Anyway, does OCD sort of, and I'm talking now, impact being an actor sort of more negatively, or do you kind of use your super strength that you've learned in recovery? Do you cope with it even better now than, say, the average person?
I mean, I say yes and no. I probably worry about different things. I'm very good at taking rejection. I don't presume that it's going to always work out, but not in a negative way. I think acting is something that OCD, apart from that one time, which is why it's my rock bottom, hasn't impacted. When I'm on stage, I'm very good at turning it off. It's something I can just do because I acted normal for 20 years of my life when I was thinking I was a danger to people and just acting at school.
Is it like my character doesn't have OCD, so you're able to kind of
not even that. Even if you were Ria, you're going to be yourself, but you're going to go on stage and present something. I'm probably doing it now to an effect. I just can do it, and is it doesn't matter. Also, I think just shifting it, I try, and my aim is to have a life that I enjoy, and I enjoy acting. But my life goal isn't to be an actor, a successful actor. I love acting. It's what I want to do. It's what I spend my time doing. God, I would try and do something that pays better. And I'm sure I have potentially the skills to do that. But it is what I want to do. But it's not, I'm going to destroy myself to become an actor.
Gotcha.
You know, I have to be very careful of perfectionism, following, you know, these rules too much, not relaxing, not resting. So it's forced me to maybe consider things that other people don't have to consider until they burn out. Yeah. Because the risk of burnout is so much higher for me, if that makes sense.
That makes real sense.
And the uncertainty, you know. What am I doing? I'm sitting with the uncertainty. Do I have the job? Don't I? That's a classic ERP. It's not, because it's not something I'm obsessing over, but it's that sitting in an uncomfortable position.
Yeah. Do you know what? It almost seems to me, asking you now, correct me if I'm wrong, that in a way you sort of take rejection maybe better than some people, and that uncertainty in some people. And the only reason I say that is because you've had to live with it your whole life, this uncertainty, you know, the nature of the anxiety side of OCD, that maybe actually, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like the industry's a walk in the park compared to what you've had to deal with in your own mind since you were 5. Have I got that right?
So. The things I would worry about would be like, where are we going if there's a fire and I'm on stage? Not the lines. I'm not worried about the lines. I'm not. I work very hard. I really try. I'm really passionate about it. But I'm not worried about whether I'm doing a good performance. I'm usually worried about some sort of irrational fear, you know, that's nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So, or like, do I look weird to my other castmates, or, you know, should I tell them I have OCD or not? You know, all these kind of things I'm thinking about, not whether or not I'm going to get the job. Or.
And how are you feeling now? Are you excited for the future? Where are you at right now?
Yes, I am. I'm excited. I'm very passionate because, you know, OCD's taken a lot from me, but also without OCD, I never would have written a play. I came as a musical theatre dancer. I didn't even act, really. And then I went to drama school, and then I created a show, and then I got funding for the show. And then because of the show, I partnered with OCD Action. And then because of OCD Action, Radio 4 got in touch. I always make a joke that it's a bit sad that I'm very grateful for being on the BBC, but not sad. Ironic that my only job with the BBC is because I'm mentally ill and not an actor. But maybe that would change one day.
That's your segue in. That is your route in.
Oh, yes. Call me. Just kidding. But do. No. Oh my God, Ria, make a sentence. Yes. I don't know what you said. I'm sorry.
It makes a beautiful sentence. And you know what? Actually, that leads
ADHD again.
Not at all. And you know what? That actually leads us brilliantly, actually, to my final point here, which is, you know, we've got some amazing links here. You just mentioned OCD Action and your, you know, BBC Radio 4 documentary. I'm going to call it a documentary. Also, in the show notes, I'm going to be putting information about Concept Theatre, which is your theatre company as well, and other links as well, which I'm going to put in there. I'm really annoyed. We're out of time, which is really irritating because I've got a lot more I want to talk to you about. Maybe there'll be a part 2, so keep an eyes peeled for that. Ria, thank you so much for coming down today.
That's okay.
Or up today, I should say, from Brighton.
Oh, yeah, South Coast me. Yes. No, thank you. It's been lovely. I could ramble forever.
I've absolutely loved it, and I think, you know, you've just really inspired a lot of people there with you know, your amazing journey that you're on. I really hope if anyone who's wondering if they've got OCD, I'd love it if they've stumbled across this and it's given the inspiration that they can get through it and be sat where you are now in this great place. And I think as well, for people who might have loved ones and friends and family that are going through it, hopefully it can, you know, help them understand it a little bit more. I wish you all the best with all your future endeavors. There's also a rumor of a podcast maybe on its way. So again, check the show notes for that. And if I can help you with that, I really, really will.
Thank you. Can I say one last sentence?
Yes,
please. I just want to say one really quick thing is that OCD is horrific, and most people have moderate to severe OCD, but it's also really treatable. Like they do always say it's really treatable, and actually, like, I'm, apart from when I'm coming off my medicine in my transition period, I've had months maybe of not really experiencing OCD, almost like non-detectable OCD, after having it for so long, in like a year and a half, you know. Wow. So in terms of like hope, I know that's a big part of your podcast. Yeah, that's a big thing to remember. However much it is maybe consuming your life, it is really quite treatable for a lot of people.
That's an amazing way
to quickly say that.
To end the podcast, and I think it's hugely important and a great reminder, and absolutely echo that. Ria, thanks again. As you can see, I'm having real problem closing this podcast because I'm enjoying it so much, but I will have to. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you as always in 2 weeks' time. Look after yourself. See you soon.